Jazzcast Pros.
Hello and welcome back to High Vibe Table Talks. I'm your host, Marshawn Hargrave, and today is going to be a bit of a different episode. I'm not sitting here saying, oh, these are the 5 tips that worked for me to get myself out of this rut, because I am talking to you from the messy middle. I'm talking to you from a place of, hey, I'm having a hard time right now navigating what business looks like. And if you're there too, I hear you, I see you, I feel you. Like, this is a real place to be. Welcome to High Vibe Table Talks, the podcast to help you, the current or aspiring solopreneur, navigate the messy middle so you can make both an income and an impact. Hi, I'm Rashawn, and I love creating safe spaces for women to be courageous in their dreams. If you are a follower here, you may notice that last week I did not release an episode, and I actually had a really great one outlined out. I had everything I wanted to talk about, and then life was lifing, and I never got to it, and now even this one I'm recording later than I should be as far as like timeline. I'm normally ahead a little bit, in some of this because my wonderful podcast producer, Jazzy, is on top of me. And so her and I were talking this morning, and she's like, so what's going on? Like, you didn't, put anything out last week, and we don't have anything scheduled for next week. And I was just like talking to her. I had plans this morning when I woke up. I was like, I'm going to, record an episode, but I'll get it out there. And even just like looking at the things that I had available, like topics that I have brainstormed that I want to talk about, I was looking at it and like, I was just like, bleh. Like, none of this sounds like something I want to talk about. Like, part of it is like, I'm in a creative rut, and part of it was like, that stuff feels very like not important at the moment. And so what I wanted to chat about today on the podcast is part of why I started High Vibe is because I wanted other people who were in the roller coaster journey of growing their business to have conversations of like, this is really hard. This isn't all rainbows and butterflies all the time. And when it does get hard for you, that doesn't mean that the journey isn't meant for you. Like, I talk about a lot in my communities about like stumbling blocks aren't roadblocks or like detour signs. Like, if you run into a stumbling block with your business, that doesn't mean that's not the journey for you, or you're not enough for that journey. They're a part of everybody's journey. For instance, one of the topics that I brainstormed was selling without burnout. How do you manage ADHD energies with the high pressure that is sales? And I'm like, well, I'm not doing so hot on the burnout piece of it at the moment. Or, hyper focus versus procrastination. And how do you manage, again, ADHD energy in this? And I feel like just with the podcast, like, I've procrastinated a lot, which is why I haven't gotten things out. And so creatively, I felt like I'm just kind of in a rut. And then on top of that, I feel a lot of imposter syndrome around talking about things. People listen to podcasts because they want to hear from experts. They want to hear from people who are doing well in certain areas. And I don't feel like I'm doing well in those areas. So who am I to talk? Even sales, like, I'm not like prospecting every single day like I probably could be. And so who am I to talk about prospecting? Some of it too that I was talking with Jazzy about as well is like, world news, the political climate that we're currently in is heavy for everybody. It doesn't matter what side or where you are with your beliefs and how you want the world to be proceeding. Like, everything is very heavy and everything is very up in the air and everything is very heated. And so with that, it just takes an emotional toll. And like one of the things that I'm oscillating back and forth between is like being really informed and knowing what is going on, but also like feeling like I need to maintain some sort of sanity and not get so absorbed in all of the things, because I have done that to myself on many occasions. At the start of the pandemic in, March, April, May of 2020, like I was watching all the things. We had the news on all the time. I needed to know all the things. I like was so full of data and information and was just like, because things were changing so rapidly, I just was like needing to know all the things. And that took a toll on my emotional health, mental health. I remember like standing, I think I've told the story on the podcast before, but I remember standing in front of the cupboard. I just started crying because making a decision about dinner, like what to eat, was like too much in that moment. So that was a learning point for me of like, okay, I need to control what I can control, and the consumption of information of what's going on in the world is not in a healthy place right now. And so I need to scale that back. And I feel similar to that right now, as far as like, I want to know what's going on. I want to be informed. It feels like, Inauguration Day was only a week ago, and so much has happened and so much has changed, and feels like there's so many things that are going on, and I'm like, I need to know all the things, and I need to not let it affect my mental health. And so part of my coping mechanisms at the moment are distracting myself with like nonsense, as far as whether it's TikTok or Threads, or those are my two big social media platforms that I like to engage in, even, on Instagram, but I'm not being intentional about what I'm doing on any of those platforms. I'm just consuming, and then not getting done the things that are higher priority, that are important, that are urgent, that are impactful. I'm not doing those things. And so then I'm feeding into my shame cycle and kind of spinning out. And that in my shame cycle lives imposter syndrome and creative ruts and a lot of negative self-talk. And so those things are all happening more frequently because I am not being intentional about my time, and I am, looking for those dopamine hits in places that are not building my business or my life in the way that I want it to. I did an episode in the beginning of January around like the ins and outs of 2025, and those have been slow to uptake. I have been hit or miss with the early bedtime. I have been a lot of misses about moving my body the way that I want to. I have had, some more hits in as far as like having fun, selling and doing certain things. But we're approaching, this is the last week of January. And I think some of the part of it is I get very like into the new year stuff and get all excited, and this is going to be the year. And I am excited about what this year holds for me personally. I feel like I have a really good plan, but with that hype up is going to come some like, what's the word I'm looking for? If you go up the roller coaster, you're going to come down as well. And so I think that as we're getting towards the end of January, next week being February, like some of that is going to happen. And so you're going to have some of that like letdown after like really being like, okay, here we go, like ready for the new year. And so I think what I wanted to come on here and really say is like, how do I continue to be high vibe during this time where I don't necessarily like feel high vibe? That is my brand. That is who I show up as in business. And right now I feel like it can be hard to be high vibe. But the other thing that came out of my conversation this morning was, because part of my spin out was like why the fuck does this even matter? Like, does this fucking matter when all the shit is going on? Sorry for the language, but that's what we talked about on our call this morning is like, who fucking cares about prospecting when it feels like the world is on fire? Literally and figuratively. And although I did see this morning that a lot of the LA fires are in the 90 plus percent contained. Okay. But there is never a time where it matters more to be high vibe than when things feel hard. A video popped up on my For You page this weekend of this comedian when someone was asking him, like, how can you stay so like positive and funny and light about your comedy when things feel so heavy and hard? And he's like, it's easy to be happy and lighthearted when things are easy and not difficult. When the world is struggling and having a hard time, that's when they really need you and your brightness and your lightness and your positivity. And so this isn't an episode to say like, okay, here are some strategies, here are the things that you can do to stay high vibe during this time. It's more of like, I'm feeling the burden of what's going on in the world right now. I think part of that is, being deeply empathetic. I feel a lot all the time, the highs, the lows. If for a little more woo-woo of my audience, I have seen a lot of astrologers talking about things going on in the universe and planets aligning and things like that in this year that are a bit more chaotic than they have been. And so it's not just me, it's not just you, it's not just politics. It is literally the universe is like in a big shift. I can't speak to it other than people who I listen to with that for that stuff have spoken about it. What I can do, what I can control is to get really grounded, lean into the things that I know that make me my best version, my most fun version, my most empathetic, my most high vibe version of myself. And that's what I need to lean into at this time. And like I said, being high vibe doesn't mean that I'm going to be high vibe 100% of the time. Like, we are human beings living in a very fractured and difficult world. And so to assume that you will be like that all the time is setting yourself up for failure. But how can you do 1% better? How can you reduce that negative self-talk by a little bit today? And I think that's where I am is, for the past couple of weeks, it's been a lot of like, God, why can't you just get your shit together? And me stepping back and being like, because life is life. Like, nobody has their shit together all the time. And so one of my ins this year was more grace, realizing where I am mentally. I want to bring more grace to that. And I don't want it to be like my empathy and my compassion about things that are going on and people that are affected by these different decisions isn't a bad thing. And I don't want to harbor like negative feelings towards my empathy for these other people. And how can I empower and embolden and impact communities so that we can make the world better? And me rotting away in my bed instead of being impactful on the world isn't going to bring in more money so that I can put that towards causes that I care about. And balancing that with some days you just need a good bed rot. Like this weekend was not it. And I think maybe that's something too that's just kind of coming to me in this moment. But like, I was in Denver visiting one of my best friends last weekend. And this weekend was just, we had 3 different games on Saturday and then a going away party and then 2 birthday parties on Sunday. So there was little time to rest on this weekend. And my kitchen is still a disaster. So the balance of like, some days you need a good bed rot. And sometimes you need to remember that that's not going to change the world. And so we need to like do both. We need to have grace for ourselves to say like, let your brain and your body rest for the certain amount of time. And then tomorrow pick up and keep marching. In the episode that I wanted to record last week and didn't get to it, I wanted it to be focused on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his message and what was important. And also, like, as women, a lot of times we see being of service as like going to work for a nonprofit or, you know, working for a charity or things like that. And we get to decide what being of service means. And, you know, I want to take the time this year to be intentional and impactful so that I can make a lot of money and give back to causes that I care deeply about. So the other thing when I was talking with Jazzy about earlier today is she was like, you know, just as a listener, like you have talked about your journey with ADHD and anxiety and being on meds. And that is one of the like self-care things that I have been doing. And she's like, you haven't gone deeper into what that looks like. It's interesting because I was actually talking with my therapist last session about like, how do I know if the meds are working? Because the kind that I'm on are like a slow build. So it takes like 6 weeks before they have built up enough in your system where you can really see a difference. And I'm like, how do I know if they're working? And it's also, you know, it was also around the holidays, which are crazy. So like, I can't expect that my anxiety is going to be all that low when the holidays are just crazy. The anxiety is going to be there whether you're on the meds are working or not. I went on medicine because I knew that like my brain needs help, but then I'm still grappling with the fact that like, is my brain broken? You know, and that sort of stigma that still comes along with something like mental health struggles. And so I think they're working. You know, I am going to talk to my doctor again soon about, you know, what should I kind of be on the lookout for as far as like, do we want to try different things if I don't feel like it's working great? I don't know. Part of why I think I haven't brought it up is because I don't have a lot of answers. And this feels like an episode of like, I don't know what I'm doing and I don't have answers for anything, but I need to get it out because I'm sure other people are in the same boat. Right before my meeting with Jazzy, I posted on Threads and said, you know, I'm just really in this creative rut with my podcast and I don't know what to talk about. And the first comment that someone commented saying, just open up and be vulnerable about that. And I didn't read it until after my call with Jazzy. And I was like, well, between Jazzy saying it and now Threads confirming it, it feels like I need to, you know, just have a really vulnerable episode. So there it was. There I am. Again, if you are having a hard time with what's going on, know that you are not alone. I hear you. I feel you. I am feeling those feelings right along with you, and nothing's wrong with feeling those. You're not doing anything wrong. And, you know, one thing that my therapist has said with me, with my anxiety starts to kick in is like, you are not anxiety. Anxiety is not you. It is something that you are feeling in that moment. And that kind of helps me like step outside of it and say like, thank you for showing up. I understand that you're here and why you're here. And we're going to work together to figure out how to get back to a good baseline. And so nothing is wrong with how you're doing it or how you're adulting or being an entrepreneur. And so together, you know, part of this journey is me figuring out what to do to kind of get back to a better baseline. So that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to work on. That's where I am right now. I hope this was helpful. And If you're listening to this on Spotify, I would love for you to comment. It's a really cool feature that Spotify for podcasters has. And I would love to hear from you and what's going on with you and how are you feeling about this time in the world. Until next time, remember that big dreams and small steps will transform your life.